I arrived in Ashford, Maine, on a cold afternoon in late October. The air smelled faintly of pine and salt from the nearby coast, and the town felt quieter than it should have been for that time of day. The houses sat too far apart, and the streets had an empty kind of silence that made every step feel louder than it was. My mother had passed away 3 months earlier, and the only family I had left was my Uncle Raymond. I had not seen him in almost 20 years. I knew him only from fragments of memory, a tall man with a hollow voice and a habit of staring at things too long. My mother never spoke much about him, but when she did, there was always a certain pause in her voice, as if she was careful about the words she chose. Raymond's house was at the far end of Miller Road, a narrow stretch surrounded by thick forest. The taxi driver hesitated before taking me there. When I told him the address, he looked at me for a moment before nodding and saying nothing. The ride was long, and the further we went, the more the trees seemed to lean inward, their bare branches clawing at the gray sky. The house itself looked older than I expected. It was a 2-story structure with chipped white paint and darkened windows. The porch sagged slightly in the middle, and there was no car in the driveway. I stood there for a moment after the taxi left, listening to the wind moving through the pines. When I knocked on the door, it opened slowly, as if it had already been unlocked. The smell that drifted out was faint but unsettling, like metal and damp earth. Inside, the hallway was dim. There was no sound of footsteps, no greeting. I stepped in, calling his name, but the only answer was the creak of the floor under my shoes. I found him in the kitchen. He was standing by the window, looking out toward the woods. His shoulders were tense, and his hands were resting on the counter. When he turned toward me, I saw that his eyes were pale, almost washed out. "Jason," he said, his voice low. "You look older than I remember." "So do you," I replied. He smiled faintly, but it did not reach his eyes. There was something distant in his expression, as if part of him was still looking out into the trees, even while he faced me. That night, the house felt too quiet. The rooms were neat, but almost bare, as if someone had removed anything personal. I could hear faint noises in the walls, a kind of soft shifting like old wood settling, but it came at irregular intervals. Raymond hardly spoke during dinner. When I asked about the town, he only said that Ashford was not what it used to be. Later, as I tried to sleep, I heard footsteps in the hallway outside my room. They were slow, deliberate, and they stopped right at my door. I waited for a knock, but none came. When I finally opened the door, the hallway was empty. The next morning, Raymond suggested we take a walk through the woods behind the house. The forest was denser than I realized, the path narrow and lined with blackened tree trunks. I noticed old ropes hanging from some branches, frayed and weathered. They swayed slightly, though there was no wind. We walked for almost an hour before we reached a clearing. In the center stood a small shed made of rusted metal sheets. It had no windows, and the door was secured with a heavy chain. The ground around it was bare, as if nothing had grown there for years. "What is that?" I asked. Raymond glanced at it briefly before turning away. "Just an old storage shed," he said. "Nothing worth looking at." But there was a sound coming from inside. It was faint at first, almost like the rustle of paper. Then it shifted into something else, a slow, dragging noise, followed by a sharp knock from within. Raymond's voice hardened. "We should head back." That night, I could not sleep again. At some point after midnight, I heard the back door of the house open. Footsteps moved across the porch, down the steps, and then toward the woods. I looked out the window and saw the beam of a flashlight cutting through the trees. It was heading in the direction of the shed. I waited until the light disappeared, then I grabbed my jacket and went outside. The air was colder, and the woods seemed to swallow every sound. When I reached the clearing, the shed door was open. The chain hung loose. Lying in the dirt, from inside came a low, steady sound, breathing, slow and deliberate, but heavier than any animal I knew. I stepped closer. The air around the shed was thick, almost metallic, and there was a faint vibration under my feet. I peered inside, my eyes adjusting to the dark. Something moved, not a person, not anything I recognized. It shifted toward me in a way that made no sound at all, its shape almost bending the shadows around it. I felt cold spread across my chest as its outline became clearer, and then it stopped, as if it was waiting for me to come closer. Before I could move, a hand grabbed my shoulder. From behind, it was Raymond. His face was pale, his eyes sharper than I had ever seen. "Do not look at it too long," he said quietly. Then he pulled me back, slammed the shed door shut, and looped the chain around it again. We stood there in silence, the sound from inside growing fainter. Raymond turned to me, his voice low and calm. "There are things here you are not ready to understand." We walked back to the house in silence. I could feel the weight of the woods behind us, and in the distance, something was knocking again. The morning light in Ashford felt wrong. It was not warm or soft, the way sunlight should be. It was pale, almost white, and it seemed to make every surface in the house look washed out and old. Raymond was already in the kitchen when I came downstairs. He was making coffee, his movements slow and deliberate. There was a faint smear of dirt along the cuff of his shirt, and when he noticed me looking at it, he pulled his sleeve down without a word. I wanted to ask about the shed. I wanted to ask about what I saw moving inside, but the weight in his eyes stopped me. There was a heaviness there that felt almost like a warning. Instead, I asked about the town. "People here keep to themselves," he said. "They always have." He handed me a cup of coffee. His hand trembled slightly as I took it. After breakfast, I walked into town alone. The streets were narrow, lined with small shops that looked like they had not changed in decades. Most of the windows were shuttered. People moved quickly from one place to another, avoiding eye contact. At the far end of Main Street, there was a boarded-up bookstore. In its dusty front window, something caught my eye. It was a photograph. The edges were curled, but the image was still clear. It showed the clearing in the woods, the same clearing where the shed stood, but in the photograph, the shed door was open, and something was standing in the doorway. I could not make out its face. The image was slightly blurred there, but the outline was wrong. Too tall, too thin. Its arms seemed longer than they should have been. I heard footsteps behind me. When I turned, a woman was standing there. She looked to be in her 50s, her hair pulled back tightly, her coat buttoned to the throat. She stared at me with a sharp, unblinking intensity. "You are staying at Raymond's place," she said. I hesitated before nodding. "You should leave," she said, "today if you can." She turned and walked away without waiting for me to answer. That night, I could not stop thinking about her words. I kept hearing the knocking sound in my head, the one I had heard from the shed. After midnight, I heard footsteps again. This time they were heavier, slower. I got out of bed and went to the hallway. The sound was coming from the staircase. When I reached the top of the stairs, I saw Raymond at the front door. He was wearing a heavy coat, and in his hand was a small metal box. His face was pale in the dim light, his expression calm but focused. "Where are you going?" I asked. He froze, then turned toward me. His voice was low, almost kind. "Stay in your room, Jason." He stepped outside and shut the door behind him. I waited a few minutes, then followed. The air was colder than the night before, and the trees looked darker, their branches twisting in the wind. I kept my distance, watching the beam of his flashlight move ahead of me. He was heading back toward the clearing dot. As I got closer, I heard another sound. Not the knocking this time, but something else. A low rhythmic hum, almost like a voice speaking in a language I could not understand. Raymond reached the shed. He set the metal box on the ground and unchained the door. The humming grew louder. I could see movement inside, the shadows shifting unnaturally. Then, something reached out. Not a hand, Not anything I could name, but a shape that moved like liquid and shadow at once. Raymond did not step back. He stood there, his head tilted slightly, as if listening. The shape stopped inches from him, then it withdrew back into the darkness of the shed. He closed the door, locked the chain, and picked up the box. That was when a branch snapped under my foot. Raymond turned sharply, his flashlight beam cutting through the darkness and landing on me. His expression did not change, but his voice was sharper than I had ever heard it. You should not have followed me. He walked toward me slowly, the metal box still in his hand. I stepped back, my chest tight. There are rules here, Jason, he said. If you break them, the things in that shed are not the worst you will have to face. The hum had stopped, but in the silence that followed, I heard something else. Footsteps in the woods, multiple sets, moving closer. Raymond turned his head slightly, listening. His grip on the metal box tightened. We need to go. Now. He grabbed my arm and pulled me back toward the path. As we moved, I looked over my shoulder. There were shapes between the trees. Tall, thin shapes that moved without sound. When we reached the house, Raymond locked the door and drew the curtains. His face was pale, his breathing steady but heavy. Tomorrow, he said quietly, we will talk, but I already knew I would not sleep that night. Because out in the woods, just beyond the edge of the clearing, the knocking had started again. I did not sleep. The knocking in the distance came in uneven bursts, sometimes loud enough to make the glass in the window tremble. Sometimes so faint, I almost thought I imagined it. But it never stopped. Raymond was awake too. I could hear him moving around downstairs, the sound of drawers opening and closing, metal scraping softly against wood. At some point, maybe near 3 in the morning, I smelled something sharp in the air, like burning wires. The smell seemed to come from outside, drifting in through the cracks around the window. I pulled the curtain back slightly and looked out toward the tree line. There was a light in the woods, not a flashlight. This was pale and steady, hovering low to the ground, just at the edge of the clearing. It shifted slightly, then split into 2 smaller lights, and then into 3. I heard the floor creak behind me. Raymond was standing in the hallway, his face in shadow. Step away from the window, he said. I turned toward him. What are they? He stepped closer, his eyes cold. They are looking for a way in. Before I could ask anything more, a sound cut through the house. Not the knocking, not the humming. This was sharper, closer. Something was scraping slowly along the siding, moving from one end of the house toward the other. Raymond's voice was low and steady. Go downstairs. Stay away from the windows. I followed him, but every step felt slower than it should. In the living room, the air was heavier. The smell of metal was stronger now. Raymond was pulling heavy curtains shut, his movements quick but controlled. Then the scraping stopped. The silence that followed was worse. It was so deep I could hear my own heartbeat. Raymond froze, his head tilted slightly toward the back door. Something moved outside. The sound was soft at first, like footsteps in loose dirt. But then it became louder, closer, until it was right against the door. The doorknob turned. Raymond reached for something under the couch. His hand came up holding a short, thick iron rod. He nodded toward the stairs. Go, Dot. But I could not move. My eyes were fixed on the door. The wood around the knob began to darken, as if the metal was bleeding heat into it. Then, in a sudden, violent motion, the door bent inward. Not broke, not splintered, but bent, like something was pushing it from all sides at once. Raymond stepped forward, his voice hard. You do not belong here. The door snapped back into place. The sound was like metal being pulled tight. Then the silence returned. Raymond turned to me. His voice was quieter now, but sharper. You cannot look out the windows at night. You cannot follow me to the woods. And if you hear the knocking at the door, you never answer. I wanted to ask why. I wanted to ask what was in the shed, what was in the woods, what was moving around the house. But before I could speak, the sound came again, knocking not from the woods this time, from upstairs. Raymond's eyes snapped toward the ceiling. His grip on the iron rod tightened. "Stay here," he said. He climbed the stairs slowly, each step deliberate. The knocking came again, this time from the hallway outside my room. It was steady now. 3 sharp knocks, then silence. I stood at the bottom of the stairs, every muscle in my body tight. Then I heard something else, a voice. It was faint, almost like it was coming through a wall. "Jason," my name. "Jason, open the door." It was my mother's voice. Raymond stopped at the top of the stairs. His voice was low, almost a whisper. "Do not answer." The voice came again, softer now, but still clear. "Jason, please, I need you." The knocking stopped. The silence that followed felt alive, like something was holding its breath. Then I heard footsteps, moving back down the hallway toward the far end of the house. The air seemed to shift, and for a moment, the smell of pine and salt from the coast filled the room. Raymond came back down the stairs, his face pale. "They are getting closer," he said quietly, "and if they get in, we will not be the only ones in this house." Before I could ask what he meant, there was another sound, from outside, near the woods. The knocking had started again, but this time it was louder, and it was coming from more than one place. The knocking came from 3 different points at once: the front of the house, the side near the kitchen, the back door that led toward the woods. Raymond moved quickly, his voice low and controlled. "They are testing the walls." I felt the air change again. That metallic scent returned, but it was stronger now, as if it was inside the walls themselves. The knocking shifted into scraping, long dragging strokes that moved along the siding. Then there was silence. Raymond's head tilted slightly. His hand tightened on the iron rod. "They are inside," he said. I turned toward the hallway, just as the floorboards creaked. Something moved past the doorway, tall and thin, its shadow bending unnaturally along the wall. Raymond stepped forward fast, grabbing my arm. "Do not look at its face." The shadow shifted again, moving toward the stairs. The air grew heavier. My chest tightened as if I had been holding my breath for too long. Raymond opened the closet in the hallway and pulled out a narrow wooden box. Inside were 4 glass vials filled with a dark liquid. He shoved 2 into my hands. "If you see one of them too close, smash this at your feet," he said. "What is it?" He looked at me sharply. "Do not ask. Just use it." The floor above us groaned. Something was moving up there. The sound was slow but heavy, like furniture being dragged across the boards. Raymond moved toward the staircase. I followed despite every part of me wanting to stay near the door. At the top of the stairs, the hallway was darker than it should have been. My room door was open, swinging slightly, though there was no wind. Something was standing just inside it. Was tall, its shoulders almost touching the frame. Its arms hung too low, the fingers long and unmoving. Its head was tilted slightly, as if listening. Raymond stepped between me and the doorway. He spoke in a low, firm tone. "You do not belong here." The thing moved. Not toward him, but sideways, like it was sliding along the wall. Its head turned toward me. I felt my vision blur. There was a sharp pressure behind my eyes. The room tilted slightly, and for a moment, I thought I could hear something. A voice, soft and layered, speaking in words I could not understand. Raymond's hand gripped my shoulder hard. "Break it now." I smashed the vial at my feet. The liquid hissed as it hit the floor, releasing a sharp metallic smell that filled the hallway. The air seemed to ripple. The thing stopped moving. It tilted its head again, then stepped backward into the shadows, and then it was gone. Raymond pulled me back down the stairs. His voice was sharper now. "This is not going to hold." As we reached the bottom, another sound tore through the house. a sharp cracking noise, followed by the shatter of glass. The window in the kitchen had broken inward. A thin shape was halfway through the frame, its limbs bending at unnatural angles. Raymond grabbed the second vial from my hand, hurling it toward the window. The hiss came again, louder this time. The shape recoiled, jerking back into the dark. We ran to the front door. Outside, the pale lights in the woods had multiplied. I could see at least 7 now, hovering low, shifting in slow, steady movements. Raymond locked the door behind us and turned toward me. "We cannot stay here. Where are we going?" He looked toward the woods, his jaw tight. "Somewhere they will not follow." From the trees, the knocking started again, but this time it was not coming from the shed. It was coming from all around us. The cold air outside hit hard as we stepped off the porch. The sound of knocking surrounded us, no longer rhythmic but scattered, as if it was echoing from every tree. Raymond moved fast, his boots cutting a path through the frost-covered grass. The pale lights in the woods shifted as we approached, but they did not move closer. Not yet. We crossed the yard and reached the narrow trail leading away from the shed. The air felt heavier here, each breath harder to draw. "Stay close, Raymond," said. I kept my eyes fixed on the ground, trying not to look at the lights moving between the trees. But something else caught my attention. Tracks in the frost. Alongside Raymond's boot prints, there were others. Thin, deep imprints, the shape uneven and wrong, stretching far longer than any human stride. They led toward the shed, and then back into the forest. The knocking stopped. The silence was worse. A faint hum began again, low and almost melodic, coming from somewhere deeper in the woods. It made the air vibrate faintly, as if the sound was not just in my ears, but in my bones. Raymond slowed, his eyes scanning the dark. "What is that sound?" I asked. He glanced at me briefly. "They are calling something." From behind us, there was a sharp crack, like a branch snapping under heavy weight. Raymond grabbed my arm. "Run." We moved fast, our breath clouding in the cold air. The hum grew louder, closer, until I could feel it in my chest. Shapes moved between the trees on both sides of the path. Tall, thin figures that slid silently over the ground, their heads tilting as we passed. They never stepped onto the path, but they followed their pace, matching ours. Up ahead, the trees thinned. I could see a faint glow, not pale like the lights, but warmer. Flickering faintly, we broke through the last line of trees into a clearing. In the center stood a small, weathered chapel, its wooden walls warped with age. A single lantern burned, faintly near the door. Raymond pushed the door open and pulled me inside. The air was warmer here, heavy with the smell of candle wax and old wood. Along the walls were dozens of strange symbols carved deep into the boards. Some old and faded, others sharp and fresh. Raymond shut the door and dropped a heavy wooden beam across it. "They will not cross this threshold," he said. I moved to the nearest wall, my eyes scanning the carvings. The symbols were jagged, some resembling twisted branches, others almost like eyes. "What are these?" I asked. Raymond lit another lantern, his expression grim. "Warnings and boundaries." From outside, the knocking began again, this time against the chapel walls. I stepped back from the door. "Will it hold?" Raymond's eyes stayed on the lantern flame. "Only if we stay inside until the sound stops." The knocking grew louder. I could feel it in the floorboards now, each strike sending a faint vibration through the wooden planks. Then the hum returned. It was louder here, almost overwhelming. The lantern flame trembled as the sound deepened. Raymond's face tightened. "They brought it." What? His eyes met mine, cold and certain. "The thing they serve." The knocking stopped. The silence was complete. And then, from somewhere high above the chapel, a new sound began. Something was breathing. The breathing was heavy, slow, and wet. It vibrated through the rafters, rattling tiny flecks of dust down from the old wood. Raymond's head tilted upward. His face went pale. "It should not be able to come here," he whispered. The lantern light flickered again, stretching our shadows across the warped floorboards. I moved closer to him, my voice low. "What is it?" He did not answer. The sound shifted. The breathing stopped, replaced by a deep, dragging scrape along the roof, as though something huge was crawling across it. The wooden beams creaked under the weight. Raymond grabbed the iron rod again and motioned toward the far wall. There was a narrow trapdoor in the floor, half hidden beneath a worn rug. "Get under there," he said. "What about you?" His jaw tightened. "Just go." The roof above us groaned. Dust fell in small clouds as something heavy shifted again. I pulled the trapdoor open. A narrow set of wooden steps led into the dark. The air rising from below was cold, damp, and thick with the smell of earth. Raymond stayed near the center of the room, the iron rod raised. The sound above stopped. Silence. I hesitated still, at the edge of the trapdoor. Then the first strike hit. Something slammed into the roof with a force that made the lantern swing wildly. The entire chapel shook. A second strike followed, then a third, each one splintering more wood. Raymond's voice was sharp now. "Down. Now." I climbed quickly into the narrow space below. It was little more than a crawl space, the floor packed dirt, the ceiling low enough to scrape my back. Raymond dropped in after me, pulling the trapdoor shut above. In the darkness, I could hear the wood above us splinter. Whatever was on the roof was breaking through. Raymond fumbled with a small box, pulling out a single lantern. The weak light revealed the dirt walls. The surface scratched with the same strange symbols carved into the chapel above. "Stay quiet," he said. The sound of wood breaking grew louder, more violent. Then it stopped. The breathing returned. But now it was inside. Dust rained down from the ceiling as something heavy moved across the floor above us. The sound was slow, deliberate, as if it was searching. Then the breathing stopped again. Silence. Raymond's hand tightened on the iron rod. His eyes were fixed on the trapdoor. For a moment, nothing happened. Then something pressed against the trapdoor from above. It did not break it open. It pressed, slow and steady, the wood bending inward as if tested. The lantern light dimmed, the flame shrinking almost to nothing. Raymond's voice was low. "Do not move. Do not breathe." The pressure on the trapdoor eased. The sound above shifted, moving toward the far end of the chapel. We stayed frozen in place, the silence stretching on. Then the breathing returned, this time from directly above us. The trapdoor creaked. A long, thin shadow stretched across the dirt wall, and then a voice spoke. It was my mother's voice. Again, "Jason." My chest tightened. "Jason, help me." Raymond's voice was sharp, almost a hiss. "It is not her." The trapdoor creaked again, the sound sharpened. The silence. Then, in a sudden movement, the lantern went out, and everything above us went silent. The darkness was complete. No lantern, no cracks of light from above. Only the sound of my own breath, too loud in the silence. Raymond's voice came from somewhere close. "Do not move." I froze, my palms pressed into the cold dirt above us. The breathing started again. It was slow, almost steady now, like it was waiting. The trapdoor would shifted softly, creaking under a faint weight. Then the voice came again. "Jason." It was closer this time, clearer. "Jason, please." I felt my hands shaking. Every part of me wanted to answer, even though I knew what Raymond had said. He was silent beside me, but I could hear the tension in his breathing. The voice changed. It was still my mother's, but wrong now. The tone bent in strange ways, like the words were being forced through a shape that was not meant for them. "Jason, open the door." The trapdoor creaked again. Then, with a sharp crack, the wood split. Cold air rushed down into the crawl space. The breathing grew louder. Raymond grabbed my arm. "Out, now." He pulled a second trapdoor open at the far end of the crawl space, one I had not seen before. A ladder led down into darkness, but the air rising from below was fresh, the scent of pine. Faint but sharp. Go, he said. I climbed quickly, my hand slipping on the cold rungs. Behind me, the chapel above groaned as more wood splintered. Something heavy dropped onto the floor above the crawl space. Raymond followed close, slamming the lower trapdoor shut behind him. We emerged into the open air at the base of a narrow slope. The chapel stood above us, dark and silent except for the faint sound of wood cracking from inside. Raymond grabbed my arm again. We cannot go back there. The pale lights were in the woods again. Dozens of them now, moving in slow arcs, circling the clearing. Raymond led me toward a narrow path that cut deeper into the forest. The air was colder here, the trees closer together. As we moved, I heard the voice again, not from behind us. From ahead. Jason. I stopped. The sound was faint, drifting between the trees, but I could feel it pulling at me. Raymond's grip tightened. Do not follow it. What is it? He glanced at me briefly, his voice low. It is what wears her voice. The path narrowed further, the lights in the trees moving closer now, matching our pace. I could hear faint movements on both sides, the sound of something sliding along the ground, keeping just out of sight. Raymond stopped suddenly. Up ahead, the path split. To the left, the trail descended toward a darker stretch of woods. To the right, it rose, toward a ridge where the trees thinned slightly. We cannot go down, he said. Why? He looked toward the dark stretch. Because that is where they wait. The voice came again, louder now. Jason. It was behind us this time, closer. Raymond's eyes narrowed. It is not trying to follow anymore. It is trying to lead. A pale light appeared ahead on the ridge. It was larger than the others, almost like a lantern, but it pulsed faintly, as if alive. Raymond pulled me toward the ridge. We move. Now we climbed quickly, the pale light growing brighter as we neared the top. But as we reached the crest, I saw what was holding it. It was not a lantern. It was a hand. Long. Thin. The fingers too many, each one tipped with something sharp. The light pulsed from beneath the skin, casting a faint glow over its arm, which disappeared into the dark. Raymond stopped dead. The hand withdrew into the trees, and then the voice came again. Jason, come closer. The ridge was narrow, the ground uneven, with roots twisting up through the frost. Raymond's eyes were locked on the dark where the hand had disappeared. We keep moving, he said. The pale lights below shifted, circling the base of the ridge. I could see faint shapes moving with them, thin figures bending low to the ground. The voice came again. Jason. It was closer now, not echoing, not drifting. It was coming from directly ahead. Raymond gripped my shoulder hard. Ignore it. Then the ground beneath us shifted. The frost cracked, and the ridge gave a sharp groan, like old wood bending. Raymond grabbed my arm, but the earth tilted suddenly, and I slipped. Sliding down the slope, branches tore at my clothes as I tumbled. The voice followed me, steady and calm despite my frantic movements. Jason, you are safe now. I hit the base of the slope hard, the breath knocked from my chest. The pale lights around me shifted, some rising higher, some sinking closer to the ground. Raymond's voice came faintly from above. Jason, get up. But the other voice was closer. I turned my head. She was standing between the trees. Her hair was the same, her clothes the same as the last time I had seen her alive. Her eyes found mine, and she smiled faintly. Jason, it is all right. Every part of me screamed that it was wrong, but my legs still moved. I took a step toward her. Her voice softened, almost a whisper. Come here. The pale lights shifted closer, forming a loose circle. I stopped just at the edge. The air was colder here, the scent of earth and metal sharp enough to sting my throat. Her head tilted slightly. Jason, Do you not know me? Her voice broke slightly on the last word. Exactly the way my mother's had when she was upset. Behind me, Raymond's voice shouted again, closer now. Do not touch it. Her expression changed instantly. The smile stayed, but her eyes sharpened. Jason, he is lying to you. The lights pulsed faintly, in rhythm with her words. I stepped back. Her smile did not fade. Her voice dropped lower, but it carried perfectly through the cold air. Jason, I can tell you what he did. The pale lights brightened slightly. Raymond was closer now, moving fast down the slope. She stepped forward. The air around her seemed to ripple faintly, like heat above asphalt. Jason, I know what he hid from you. Her voice was almost a whisper now, but I felt every word in my chest. I can tell you about your father. Raymond reached me then, pulling me back sharply. The circle of pale lights closed tighter. Her expression did not change. Jason, you will come back. The lights pulsed once, and then she was gone. Raymond dragged me back toward the ridge, his voice low and urgent. Do not answer her, ever. I stumbled. As we climbed, the pale lights still moving below us, Raymond's voice was tight. They will try again. And next time, it will not be her. The climb back up the ridge was slow. My chest ached. My head was still ringing from the fall, and every few seconds I caught myself glancing back at the tree line, half expecting her shape to be there again. Raymond kept his hand locked around my arm, his grip like iron. We did not speak until we reached the top. The pale lights had fallen back slightly, though I could still see them moving in the trees below. Raymond stopped near a twisted pine, his eyes scanning the dark. We will keep moving, but you need to listen now. I leaned against the tree, my breath visible in the cold air. What was that? His jaw tightened. You know what it was not? I stayed quiet. Raymond looked at me then, and for the first time since this began, I saw something in his expression that looked like hesitation. They will always use the voice that will pull you closest to them, he said. It will not stop, and you cannot answer. Why her? Because they think you will follow. I stared at him, my voice low. What did she mean about my father? Raymond's eyes shifted away, toward the woods. Tell me. The wind moved through the ridge, carrying with it a faint hum. It was weaker here, but still there, threading through the silence like a warning. Raymond's voice was quieter now. Your father was not the man you think he was. My chest tightened. He continued. He was part of this before you were born. I took a step closer. Part of what Raymond's gaze came back to me. Steady now. The people who learned how to see them, how to fight them, and sometimes, how to use them. My stomach turned. Use them. Raymond nodded once, but he went too far. The pale lights shifted again below us. I could feel the hum growing stronger. What happened to him? I asked. Raymond's answer was quiet, but each word was sharp. He disappeared in these woods. I felt the cold in my chest now. Disappeared how? Raymond's voice was lower still, the same way your mother did. The hum rose suddenly, sharper now, echoing through the ridge. Raymond's head turned sharply toward the sound. They are moving again, he said. I took a step back from him. If my father was part of this, then why did you never tell me? Raymond's expression did not change. Because you were safer, not knowing. The hum grew louder. A pale light appeared ahead of us on the ridge, larger than the others. Raymond's voice was firm now. We need to go. I stayed where I was. The hum deepened again, and from the dark ahead, a voice spoke. It was not my mother's voice this time. It was my father's. The voice stopped me cold. Jason. It was deep, steady, exactly as I remembered it from when I was a child. Jason, I need you to listen. Raymond stepped in front of me, the iron rod raised. Do not look at it, but I already had. The pale light ahead grew brighter, pulsing faintly. A figure stepped into view between the trees. It was him. His hair was darker, his face younger than when I had last seen him. His eyes caught the pale light, and for a moment, I could almost believe it was real. Jason, I am here to take you home. The hum deepened, the pale lights below shifting, moving in slow arcs like a tide pulling inward. Raymond's voice was sharp. It is not him. My father's eyes moved to Raymond, and his expression changed. Still lying, I see. Raymond's grip on the iron rod tightened. Stay back. The figure took another step forward. The air rippled faintly around him, the cold pressing in harder. Jason, he never told you, did he? I felt the pull again, the same pull I had felt with her voice, but stronger now. My father's voice was calm. He told you I disappeared. He never told you why. Raymond's voice cut through the cold air. Enough. The hum rose sharply, almost painful now. The pale lights moved closer, their shapes clearer, long, thin figures bending low. There, heads tilting toward the ridge. My father's voice lowered. Jason, I did not vanish. I crossed over. The pale light around him pulsed once. Raymond stepped forward. Stop talking. My father's voice did not change. He brought you here for a reason. Jason. Raymond moved closer, the iron rod raised. Jason, you need to know the truth. The pale lights closed in now, circling tightly. The hum was almost deafening. My father's voice rose over it. He brought you because he cannot do what must be done. Raymond's voice was sharp, almost a shout. Do not listen. The figure stepped closer, the air distorting more around him. Jason, you are not just his grandson. You are mine. The cold in my chest turned to something sharp. The pale lights flared once, and the figure smiled. Jason, you can come with me now. The hum reached its peak, the air shaking with it. Raymond stepped between us, the iron rod in both hands. Then the pale lights surged forward. The figures broke the circle, rushing toward the ridge. Raymond swung the rod, the air cracking with each strike. The figure of my father moved closer, his voice steady despite the chaos. Jason, it is your choice. Raymond's voice cut through. Move. Now. I turned, the pale lights closing in from every side. The hum shook the ground. Raymond shoved me forward, his voice tight. Do not look back. We ran. The pale lights followed. There. Shapes bending low, the hum never stopping. At the base of the ridge, the trees opened into a narrow path. The hum weakened here, the pale light slowing at the edge of the clearing. Raymond pulled me through the trees, his voice low. Do not stop. We moved until the woods were quiet again. Raymond stopped finally, his breath harsh in the cold air. I looked at him, my chest still tight. Was it him? Raymond's eyes stayed on the dark behind us. No, the hum was gone now, but I could still feel it in my chest, faint and steady, like a pulse. I looked back toward the ridge, and I knew it was not over. We did not speak for hours. The forest thinned, the trees giving way to a stretch of frozen fields. The first light of dawn was pale and colorless, casting long shadows over the frost. Raymond's pace slowed. His eyes scanned the horizon, always returning to the dark line of trees behind us. When we reached the old road, he stopped. This is where I leave you, he said. I stared at him. That is it. His gaze was steady. It will not follow you here. Not yet. I looked back toward the ridge. The line of trees was still and dark now. The pale lights were gone. Raymond's voice was quieter now. You will hear it again. My chest tightened. What if I do? He adjusted the iron rod at his side. Then you remember what I told you. You do not answer. I wanted to ask more, but he had already turned back toward the trees. I watched him go until the fog swallowed his shape. The road was empty. I started walking. By the time I reached town, the sun was higher, but the light did nothing to ease the cold that stayed in my chest. That night, in the small apartment above the old hardware store, I sat in the dark. The hum was faint, so faint, I thought I imagined it. Then, a voice spoke. Jason, It was my father's voice. Jason, I am still here. I gripped the edge of the table hard enough to hurt. The voice was calm. You will come back. The hum deepened for just a moment, like a single pulse of sound. Then it was gone. The room was silent. I sat in the dark, waiting, and I knew I would hear it again.